Right now, somewhere in your day, something is quietly stealing your peace. Maybe it's the worry that wakes you at 3 in the morning. Maybe it's the way one rude comment can ruin your whole afternoon. Maybe you're just tired of feeling like life is happening to you instead of for you. Here's the truth nobody tells you. Staying calm and positive isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, one small choice at a time, and anyone can learn it, including you. In the chapters ahead, you'll discover simple, practical tools you can use today to quiet your racing mind, bounce back from hard days, and finally feel steady no matter what's going on around you. This isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about becoming someone nothing can knock down for long. Stay with me, because the calmer, stronger you starts right here. Chapter 1. Embrace daily calm to control your inner reactions. There is a moment, so small you might miss it if you're not paying attention, that decides the entire shape of your day. It happens right before you react. Someone says something sharp. A message arrives that makes your stomach drop. The car in front of you brakes too hard, and your heart jumps into your throat. In that sliver of time, before your mouth opens or your hand moves, something is deciding what happens next. Most people never notice this moment exists. They live as if their reactions are automatic, as if anger or panic or irritation simply happens to them, the way weather happens to a field. But that gap between what occurs and how you respond to it is the most powerful piece of real estate you will ever own. And the work of staying calm begins with learning to live inside that gap on purpose. Picture two people receiving the exact same harsh email from a boss. The words on the screen are identical. The tone is identical. The timing is identical. One person reads it, feels their chest tighten, and within seconds fires back a defensive reply, typing fast, fingers heavy on the keys, each word sharpened by wounded pride. The other person reads the same email, notices the heat rising in their face, and instead of typing anything, closes the laptop. They walk to the kitchen, pour a glass of water, and stand by the window for 2 minutes. When they come back, they write a calm, clear response that solves the actual problem instead of feeding the emotional fire. Same event. 2 completely different outcomes. The difference wasn't intelligence or personality. The difference was that one person knew the gap existed and used it, and the other didn't even know it was there. This is what it means to embrace daily calm and control your inner reactions. It is not about suppressing feelings or pretending nothing bothers you. It is not about becoming numb or detached from the world. It is about recognizing that between any event and your response to it, there is space, and that space belongs entirely to you. Nobody can take it from you, not your boss, not traffic, not a rude stranger, not even the worst news you could receive. They can create the event. They cannot make the choice for you. Once you understand this fully, in your bones and not just your mind, you stop being a passenger in your own life, and you start being the one who steers. For most of human history, the people considered wisest weren't the ones who avoided hardship. They were the ones who walked through fire without losing themselves in the flames. They lost loved ones, faced exile, suffered illness and betrayal, and still managed to wake up the next day with steady hands and clear eyes. They weren't born this way. They trained for it, the same way an athlete trains a muscle, through repetition, through small daily practice, through choosing again and again to respond rather than react. That is the entire foundation of this chapter, and, honestly, of everything that follows in this book. Calm is not a personality trait some people are lucky enough to have. Calm is a skill, and like any skill, it grows stronger every time you practice it. Let's talk about what actually happens inside your body when something triggers you, because understanding this changes everything. When you feel threatened, whether by an angry coworker or bad news, or even just a string of red lights making you late, your body doesn't know the difference between real physical danger and emotional discomfort. It treats both the same way. Your heart rate climbs. Your breathing gets shallow and fast. Your muscles tighten, especially around your jaw, shoulders, and stomach. Your thinking brain, the part responsible for reasoning and patience, temporarily goes quiet, while the older, faster part of your brain takes the wheel, the part built purely for survival, not for wisdom. This is not weakness, this is biology. This happens to everyone, including the calmest, most disciplined people you know. The difference is that calm people have trained themselves to notice this happening in real time, and that noticing is what creates the gap. Here is the first practical tool, and I want you to actually use this today, not just read about it. The next time you feel that familiar heat rising, whether it's frustration, anxiety, or anger, pause and silently name what you're feeling. Don't judge it. Don't fight it, just name it. Say to yourself, quietly, this is frustration, this is fear, this is hurt pride. Something remarkable happens the moment you name an emotion instead of just drowning in it. You create distance between yourself and the feeling. You go from being the emotion to being the person observing the emotion, and that observer is calm by nature, even when the feeling underneath is loud. This single habit, repeated daily, rewires how you experience stress over time. The second tool builds directly on the first, and it's something you can do anywhere, in any situation, without anyone noticing. It's the slow count to 10, but done with intention rather than as a cliché. When you feel triggered, breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4, hold for a count of 2, then breathe out through your mouth for a count of 6. Do this 3 times. Your exhale should always be longer than your inhale, because that signals your nervous system to relax. While you're doing this, you're not trying to stop thinking. You're simply giving your body time to come back online before your mouth says something your future self will regret. This takes less than 30 seconds. 30 seconds, done consistently, can change the trajectory of an entire relationship, an entire career, an entire week. Now let's talk about something most people overlook completely. The morning sets the emotional tone for everything that follows, and most people surrender those first moments without a fight. Think about how many mornings start with your phone screen lighting up your face before your feet even touch the floor, scrolling through messages, notifications, and other people's opinions before you've had a single quiet moment with your own thoughts. You're essentially handing the steering wheel of your mood to whoever sends the first message or whatever headline pops up first. Instead, claim the first 10 minutes of your day as untouchable. No phone, no noise. Just sit, breathe, and let your mind settle before the world starts pulling at you from every direction. This isn't about discipline for its own sake. It's about deciding on purpose who gets to set your emotional temperature before anyone else has the chance to do it for you. Real-world application matters more than theory. So let's walk through how this looks in an actual day. Imagine you're stuck in traffic, 15 minutes from an important meeting, and the cars ahead aren't moving. Your jaw tightens. Your hands grip the wheel. Your mind starts racing toward worst-case scenarios. This is the moment. Not later, not when you calm down on your own eventually, but right now, in the car, with your hands on the wheel. You notice the tightness in your chest and name it. This is anxiety about being late. You take 3 slow breaths, in for 4, out for 6. You ask yourself a simple question that cuts through the panic. Is there anything I can do about this traffic right now? The answer is no, so you redirect your energy toward the one thing you can control, which is how you walk into that meeting, whether 5 minutes late and rattled, or 5 minutes late and composed. The traffic doesn't change, your experience of it completely does. Or imagine a harder scenario, something closer to the heart. Your sibling says something cutting during a family dinner, something that stings because it touches an old wound. Every instinct in your body wants to fire back, to defend yourself, to make them feel the same sting you just felt. This is exactly where most relationships get damaged beyond repair, in these unguarded seconds of reaction. Instead, you feel the heat rise in your chest, you name it silently as hurt, and you give yourself permission to not respond immediately. You might simply say, I need a moment, and step outside for fresh air. 5 minutes later, when you return, you're not the same person who left the table. You're someone who chose their next words instead of letting wounded pride choose them for you. This doesn't mean you never address the issue. It means you address it from a place of strength rather than from a place of raw, reactive pain. There's a deeper truth hiding underneath all of this, something worth sitting with for a moment. Every time you react instead of respond, you give away a piece of your power to whoever or whatever triggered you. Think about that honestly. When you let a rude stranger ruin your entire afternoon, you've handed them control over your mood for hours, long after they've forgotten the interaction ever happened. When you let one harsh comment from years ago still echo in your head during quiet moments, you're still paying rent to a memory that doesn't even know it's being thought about. Calm is not passive. Calm is the most active form of self-respect there is, because it means refusing to let your inner world be governed by outside noise. This doesn't mean you become cold or unfeeling. The strongest, calmest people you'll ever meet often feel things more deeply than anyone else in the room. They cry at things that move them. They feel anger at injustice. They feel joy fully, without holding back. The difference is that they've separated feeling deeply from reacting wildly. Feeling is human and necessary. Reacting without thought is what creates regret. You can feel the full weight of an emotion and still choose, with steady hands, how you move through it. Building this skill daily requires more than understanding it once while reading a chapter. It requires practice woven into ordinary moments, not just the dramatic ones. Each night, before sleep, take 90 seconds to mentally walk back through your day and find one moment where you reacted instead of responded. Don't punish yourself for it. Just notice it, the way a coach reviews game footage, looking for one small adjustment to make next time. Ask yourself what triggered you, what you felt in your body, and what a calmer version of yourself might have done differently. This isn't about guilt. It's about training your awareness to catch these moments faster and faster, day after day, until eventually you start catching them in real time instead of in hindsight. Another practice worth building into your week is what some call the pause walk. When something has rattled you and your mind feels like a storm, step outside, even if it's just for 5 minutes, and walk without your phone. Feel your feet against the ground. Notice the temperature of the air against your skin. Look at something far away, a tree, a building, the sky, and let your eyes rest there instead of staring at a screen up close. This simple shift, physically moving your body and changing what your eyes focus on, interrupts the spiral of racing thoughts faster than almost anything else you can do. Movement combined with fresh air tells your nervous system that the danger has passed, even when your mind is still convinced otherwise. Understand something important here. Staying calm doesn't mean problems disappear. Your bills don't pay themselves because you breathed deeply. Difficult people don't suddenly become easy because you named your emotions. The traffic still exists. The harsh email is still sitting in your inbox. What changes is your capacity to face these things with a clear mind instead of a flooded one. A clear mind solves problems faster and better than a panicked one ever could. Calm isn't the reward for solving your problems. Calm is the tool you use to solve them well. There will be days when you fail at this, when something catches you completely off guard, and you react before you even realize what's happening. This is not proof that the practice doesn't work. This is proof that you're human, training a skill that takes a lifetime to refine. Even people who have practiced this for decades still get caught off guard sometimes. The goal was never perfection. The goal is progress, catching yourself a little faster each time, recovering a little quicker each time, until the gap between event and response becomes wide enough that you almost always have room to choose. So here is what I want you to carry forward from everything we've covered. Somewhere today, probably sooner than you expect, something will happen that tries to steal your calm. A message, a comment, a delay, a disappointment. In that exact moment, remember the gap exists and it belongs to you. Name what you feel instead of becoming it. Breathe slowly, exhale longer than you inhale, and give your body time to catch up with your intentions. Ask yourself what you can actually control in this moment, and place your energy there instead of everywhere else. And at the end of the day, look back gently, not to judge yourself, but to learn. This single shift, choosing your response instead of surrendering to reaction, is the foundation everything else in this book will build upon. Every other skill, releasing negative thoughts, building resilience, cultivating gratitude, mastering your emotions under pressure, all of it depends on this first and most essential practice. Master this, even imperfectly, even slowly, and you will notice something remarkable happening over the coming weeks. The world around you won't necessarily get easier, but you will become someone who can walk through it without losing your footing, someone whose calm becomes a quiet kind of strength that other people start to notice and lean on. That strength starts with one small pause. Practice daily until it becomes who you are. Chapter 2. Release negative thoughts and welcome lasting inner peace. Picture a glass of water that's been sitting still on a table for hours. The water is completely clear. You can see straight through to the bottom of the glass. Now imagine someone shakes that glass hard for 30 seconds. Suddenly the water turns cloudy, murky, impossible to see through. That cloudiness doesn't come from anything new being added to the water. It's the same water. The murkiness comes from particles that were always sitting quietly at the bottom, getting stirred up and suspended in the water, blocking the light from passing through. Your mind works in almost the exact same way. Negative thoughts don't usually appear out of nowhere. They are old sediment sitting at the bottom of your mind. Old fears, old hurts, old beliefs about yourself that were planted years ago. And certain triggers throughout your day shake them loose, clouding your thinking until you can no longer see clearly. This chapter is about learning how to let that water settle again, and more than that, learning how to remove some of that sediment permanently, so it stops clouding your mind every single time life gives it a shake. Here's something most people never realize about negative thoughts. They are not facts, even though they feel exactly like facts in the moment. A thought that says, "I always mess things up," feels just as real and certain as a thought that says, "The sky is blue." But one of these is an observable truth about the physical world, and the other is a story your mind constructed, usually built from a handful of painful memories that got generalized into a permanent rule about who you are. The mind does this because it's trying to protect you. If it can predict failure before it happens, it believes it's saving you from disappointment. But this protection comes at an enormous cost. It keeps you small. It keeps you cautious in places where boldness is exactly what you need. It keeps you replaying old wounds instead of building new strength. The first step toward inner peace is learning to separate yourself from your thoughts, rather than fusing with them completely. Right now, when a negative thought enters your mind, you likely experience it as "I am a failure" rather than "I am having the thought that I am a failure." That second version feels clumsy and unnatural at first, but it creates an enormous amount of breathing room. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices the thoughts. Think about that for a moment, because it changes everything. If you were truly identical to every thought passing through your head, you'd have no way of noticing them at all, because there would be no separate observer to do the noticing. The fact that you can step back and say, "There's that old thought again," proves you are something larger and steadier than the thought itself. You are the sky. The thoughts are just clouds passing through. Some days bring storm clouds, some days bring soft white ones, but the sky itself never changes shape because of the clouds moving through it, practically speaking. Here is how you build this separation in real time. The next time a harsh thought arrives, something like, "Everyone thinks I'm not good enough," or "I'll never get past this," try labeling it out loud or in your head using this exact structure. I'm noticing the thought that everyone thinks I'm not good enough. Notice what just happened. The sentence didn't deny the thought or argue with it. It simply placed a small gap of awareness between you and the thought, like putting a pane of glass between yourself and a loud noise outside. The noise is still there, but it no longer has direct access to your nervous system. Do this consistently every single time a heavy thought shows up, and within a few weeks, you'll notice these thoughts losing their grip much faster than they used to. The second tool for releasing negative thoughts is something philosophers across centuries have pointed to again and again. Examine the evidence rather than accepting the verdict. Negative thoughts love to operate like a courtroom where they are both the prosecutor and the judge, never giving you a chance to call your own witnesses. When a thought says, "I always ruin relationships," stop and actually examine the claim the way a fair judge would. Is always true. Think of even one relationship, friendship, or connection in your life that didn't end in ruin. If you can find even one example, the word always collapses and an exaggerated, absolute thought becomes a smaller, more honest, more manageable one. I've struggled in some relationships, and I'm learning how to do better. That second version isn't comfortable exactly, but it's true, and it's something you can actually work with. The first version, the absolute one, gives you nothing to work with except shame. Drop this down somewhere, because it will serve you for the rest of your life. A thought that cannot survive being questioned was never strong, it was only loud. Negative thoughts rely almost entirely on volume and repetition to feel true. They rarely rely on actual evidence. The moment you turn toward them and calmly ask, "Where's the proof?" many of them simply dissolve because they were never built on solid ground to begin with. Now let's talk about something practical you can do today with your hands and your time, not just your thinking, because release isn't only a mental exercise, it's also a physical and behavioral one. Get a plain notebook, nothing fancy, and at the end of each day write down the 3 heaviest thoughts that bothered you that day. Don't filter them. Don't make them sound polished. Just write them exactly as they showed up in your head. Then, next to each one, write a single honest sentence questioning it. Did this thought help me today, or did it just hurt me? That's it. You're not trying to solve your entire psychology in one notebook entry. You're training a habit of looking your thoughts directly in the eye instead of letting them run wild and unchecked in the background of your mind, which is where they do the most damage, quietly shaping your mood and your choices without you ever noticing the steering wheel had been taken from your hands. There's a particular kind of negative thought that deserves special attention here, because it's one of the most common and one of the most corrosive: resentment. Resentment is different from ordinary negative thinking because it isn't really about the present moment at all. It's a thought stuck on repeat about something that already happened, something you cannot change no matter how many times you replay it in your mind. Carrying resentment is exhausting in a very specific way because you're spending today's energy fighting yesterday's battle, a battle that has already ended, whether you wanted it to end that way or not. The person who hurt you may not even remember the incident anymore, may have moved on completely with their life, while you're still standing in that same moment, replaying it, feeling the same sting over and over, essentially punishing yourself on their behalf, without them even being present for it. Releasing resentment doesn't mean pretending what happened didn't matter, and it doesn't mean rushing into forced forgiveness before you're ready. It means making a clear, deliberate decision that you are no longer willing to pay rent on a room you don't have to live in anymore. Try this practice. Write a letter to the person or situation that hurt you, saying everything you've never said, holding nothing back, being as honest and unfiltered as you need to be. Then, instead of sending it, burn it, or tear it into small pieces, or simply close the notebook and put it away. The point of this exercise was never to deliver a message to someone else. The point was to finally take the heavy thing out of your chest and put it somewhere outside of your body, so you stop carrying it everywhere you go, into every new relationship, every new opportunity, every quiet morning. Another deeply practical habit for releasing negative thinking is limiting your exposure to whatever feeds it. If you notice that scrolling through your phone late at night consistently leaves you comparing your life to others and feeling worse about yourself, that's not a mystery you need to investigate further. That's clear evidence sitting right in front of you. Set a hard boundary. No phone for the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes of your day. Replace that time with something that actually settles your mind. Reading a few pages of a good book, stretching your body slowly, sitting in silence with a warm drink in your hands. You wouldn't keep eating food that consistently made you sick just because it was convenient and available. Apply that same basic logic to what you feed your mind. Your inner peace doesn't arrive as a single dramatic moment where all your problems disappear and your mind goes permanently quiet forever. That version of peace doesn't exist for anyone, no matter how wise or disciplined they become. Real inner peace is something closer to maintenance, like tending a garden. New weeds will always grow. That's simply what gardens do, what minds do, what life does. The peaceful person isn't someone whose garden never grows weeds. The peaceful person is someone who has learned to recognize the weeds quickly and pull them while they're still small, instead of letting them spread for months until they've taken over the entire garden and choked out everything good that was trying to grow there. You will have negative thoughts again today, possibly within the next hour. This is not a sign that you've failed at this chapter or that peace isn't meant for you. It's simply a sign that you're a human being, with a mind that's been running certain patterns for years, sometimes decades. What's different now, starting from this moment forward, is that you have tools you didn't have before. You can notice the thought instead of becoming it. You can question its evidence instead of accepting its verdict without trial. You can write it down and examine it instead of letting it run silently in the background, shaping your mood and your choices without your permission. You can release old resentment onto paper instead of carrying it in your chest for another decade. Practice this daily the same way you practiced calm in the chapter before this one. Because peace, just like calm, is not something you either have or don't have. It is something you build, one noticed thought, one questioned belief, one released resentment at a time, until the water in your glass stays clear far longer than it used to, and clears itself far faster on the days something does come along to shake it. Chapter 3. Build unshakable resilience through small daily mental habits. A bone becomes stronger after it breaks and heals, not weaker. Doctors who study bone density have found that the spot where a fracture once was often becomes the densest, toughest part of the entire bone once it fully heals, sometimes even stronger than the surrounding bone that was never injured at all. This isn't poetic exaggeration, it's basic physiology. The body senses the stress, responds by building extra material at that exact point, and turns the break into reinforcement. Your mind, your character, your capacity to handle hardship works on a remarkably similar principle, though almost nobody is taught this early enough in life to use it on purpose. Resilience isn't something you either have or don't have, inherited like eye color. It's a structure you build, break by break, through specific small habits practiced on ordinary days, long before the big storms ever arrive. Most people get this backwards. They wait for a crisis, a job loss, a health scare, a broken relationship, and then try to suddenly become resilient in the middle of the worst moment of their life, with no prior practice and no foundation underneath them. That's like trying to learn how to swim for the first time while you're already drowning. It almost never works, and when it does work, it comes at an enormous emotional cost that could have been avoided. Real resilience is built on quiet, unremarkable days, the Tuesday afternoons and Thursday mornings where nothing dramatic is happening, because those are the days where you have enough safety and enough margin to practice the small habits that become armor later, when you need it most. The first habit worth building, and one of the most overlooked, is voluntary discomfort, deliberately choosing small amounts of difficulty on your own terms rather than only encountering difficulty when life forces it on you. This sounds strange at first, almost unpleasant, but consider what it actually does. If the only discomfort you ever experience is the discomfort that ambushes you, unplanned and unwanted, you never get the chance to practice your response to discomfort in a low-stakes setting. You're always meeting hardship for the first time, every single time, with no rehearsal behind you. Voluntary discomfort flips this. Take a cold shower for the last 30 seconds, instead of stepping out as soon as the water turns chilly. Go for a walk in uncomfortable weather, instead of waiting for perfect conditions. Sit through mild hunger before a meal, instead of eating the second your stomach makes the smallest sound. None of these things are dangerous or extreme. They're small, controlled doses of discomfort that train your nervous system to stay steady when things aren't easy, the exact same skill you'll need later when life hands you discomfort you didn't choose and can't control. There's a particular phrase worth carrying with you here. Comfort is not the same thing as growth, and the two often move in opposite directions. A life arranged entirely around avoiding discomfort produces a person who falls apart at the first sign of real difficulty, because that person has spent years training the opposite muscle, the muscle of escape and avoidance. A life that includes regular, deliberate, small doses of difficulty produces a person who can meet a genuine crisis with steadier hands, because the body and mind have already rehearsed staying calm while uncomfortable, dozens or hundreds of times before. The second habit is what we might call the worst-case rehearsal, a practice used by people who study risk and decision-making, and one that sounds counterintuitive until you actually try it. Most people avoid thinking about worst-case scenarios because it feels frightening, like inviting bad luck into the room by even acknowledging it's possible. But avoidance doesn't make the worst case less likely to happen. It only makes you less prepared for it if it does. Instead, take 5 quiet minutes, perhaps during your morning routine, and ask yourself plainly, what is the worst realistic outcome of this situation I'm currently worried about? And what would I actually do if it happened? Walk through it fully. If I lost this job, what would my first 3 steps be? If this relationship ended, how would I rebuild my days? If my health took a turn, who would I call first? This isn't about dwelling in fear or imagining disaster for its own sake. It's about removing the fog around uncertainty, because fear of the unknown is almost always heavier and more paralyzing than fear of something specific and named. Once you've actually mapped out your response to the worst case, even just on paper in your own mind, that fear shrinks down to a manageable size because you now know you have a plan, and a person with a plan is rarely as afraid as a person without one. The third habit, and perhaps the most quietly powerful one, is tracking your wins instead of only tracking your losses. The human mind has a strong natural bias toward remembering pain more vividly than progress, an old survival mechanism from a time when remembering danger kept our ancestors alive longer than remembering pleasant afternoons did. But this bias, left unchecked in modern life, slowly convinces people they're failing far more often than they actually are, simply because failures stick in memory like burrs on fabric while quiet successes slide right past unnoticed. Counter this directly. Each night, write down one thing, even something small, that you handled well that day. Not a grand achievement, just a moment where you responded better than you might have a year ago, where you stayed calm during a hard conversation, where you finished something you wanted to quit, where you got back up after a small setback without spiraling. Over weeks and months, this builds something resilience researchers call self-efficacy, a deep, evidence-based confidence that you are someone who handles hard things, built not on empty positive thinking, but on an actual written record of proof. When the next hard moment comes, and it will, you won't be facing it as someone who has no idea whether they can handle difficulty. You'll be facing it as someone with a notebook full of evidence that says, You've handled hard things before, and you'll handle this one too. Let's talk about how this looks in an actual life, because resilience that only exists in theory helps nobody. Picture someone who spent the last several months building these small habits, taking cold showers, rehearsing worst-case scenarios, tracking nightly wins. Then one ordinary Tuesday they receive a phone call that their position at work is being eliminated, effective immediately. The old version of this person, the one without these habits built into their days, might have spent that night in total panic, unable to sleep, catastrophizing every possible bad outcome, feeling like their entire identity had been ripped away in a single phone call. The version of this person who has been quietly training resilience for months experiences real shock, real disappointment. This is not about feeling nothing, but underneath that shock, there's a foundation that doesn't crumble. They've already mentally rehearsed a version of this exact scenario. They already have a written record proving to themselves that they handle hard things. They sit down that same evening, shaken but steady, and start making a list of next steps instead of spiraling into a list of worst fears. The job loss is identical in both scenarios. The internal experience and the actual outcome of the weeks that follow is dramatically different, because resilience had been built in advance, on the quiet days, long before it was needed. Here's a habit closely connected to all of this, one that deserves its own attention: rebuilding your relationship with failure itself. Most people treat failure as proof of something permanent and damning about who they are, rather than information about one specific attempt that didn't work. This single shift in interpretation changes everything about how quickly someone recovers from setbacks. When something doesn't go as planned, train yourself to ask one specific question instead of spiraling into self-judgment. What does this teach me that I didn't know yesterday? That's the entire reframe. Not what's wrong with me, but what did I just learn? A business that fails teaches the founder exactly which approach doesn't work. Valuable information for the next attempt. A relationship that ends teaches you something about compatibility, communication, or timing that you didn't fully understand before. Pain that comes without any learning attached to it is simply suffering, but pain that comes attached to a lesson becomes fuel, something you can actually use to build the next version of your life. One more practice worth adding to your daily structure is what could be called the steady anchor. A single non-negotiable habit you keep, no matter how chaotic or difficult your day becomes. This might be a short walk every evening regardless of weather or mood, or making your bed first thing every morning before anything else happens, or reading 10 pages of a book before sleep, no matter how exhausted you are. The specific habit matters far less than the consistency of it. What this anchor does is give you one small piece of stable ground to stand on during periods when everything else feels uncertain or overwhelming. When your world is shaking, having one tiny ritual you can still complete, exactly as you always do, sends a quiet signal to your nervous system that not everything is out of control, that you still have agency, that you are still the one steering at least one small part of your life, even when the rest feels stormy. Resilience built this way doesn't make hard things stop happening. Nothing you build, no habit you practice, will ever make life free of loss, disappointment, rejection, or pain. That's not the goal, and chasing that goal will only lead to frustration, because it's simply not available to any human being who has ever lived. What you're actually building is something different and far more valuable: the unshakable knowledge earned through small daily practice rather than borrowed from a motivational quote. That whatever comes, you have the internal structure to meet it, absorb the impact, and keep moving forward. The bone that broke and healed stronger didn't become unbreakable. It became reinforced exactly where it needed reinforcement most. That's what you're doing here every day with these small habits. You're not trying to become someone nothing can hurt. You're building the kind of strength that, when life inevitably does hurt you, allows you to heal back stronger at exactly the point where you broke. Chapter 4. Transform stress into strength using simple breathing techniques. Your breath is the only part of your nervous system that runs automatically, but also answers to you the moment you decide to take the controls. Your heartbeat keeps going whether you pay attention to it or not, and you cannot simply decide to slow it down by willpower alone. Your digestion runs in the background without asking your permission. The release of stress hormones into your bloodstream happens far below the level of conscious choice. But breathing sits in a unique position, balanced perfectly between the automatic and the deliberate. It will keep going on its own while you sleep, while you're distracted, while you've forgotten it entirely, and yet at any moment you step and change its speed, its depth, its rhythm. This makes your breath the single most accessible doorway you have into a nervous system that otherwise seems completely out of your reach. When stress floods your body, you cannot reach in and manually lower your heart rate or stop the hormones, but you can change your breathing, and changing your breathing changes everything downstream from it. Here's what most people never learn about stress, and understanding it changes how you'll relate to it for the rest of your life. The physical sensations of stress and the physical sensations of readiness are nearly identical. The racing heart, the quickened breath, the heightened alertness, the energy surging through your limbs, these are the same signals whether you're terrified or excited, whether you're about to fall apart or about to perform at your absolute best. Your body doesn't produce one chemistry for panic and a completely different chemistry for peak performance. It produces roughly the same activation, and your mind decides which story to attach to it. This is profoundly good news because it means stress is not your enemy that must be eliminated. Stress is raw energy waiting to be directed, and your breath is the steering wheel that decides whether that energy turns into a breakdown or a breakthrough. When you're stressed, your breathing naturally becomes shallow and fast, pulling air into only the upper portion of your chest in quick, tight sips. This shallow chest breathing sends a signal back to your brain that says danger is present, stay alarmed, keep the body in emergency mode. It's a feedback loop, and most people are trapped inside it without realizing it. The stress makes the breathing shallow, and the shallow breathing tells the brain to produce more stress, around and around, tightening with each turn. The way out of this loop is not to think your way calm, because trying to reason with a body in emergency mode rarely works in the moment. The way out is to deliberately change the breath, which breaks the loop at its physical root and sends the opposite signal upward to the brain. The danger has passed, you can stand down now, it's safe to settle. The most fundamental technique, and the one to master before any other, is slow breathing into the belly rather than the chest. Place one hand flat on your stomach and one hand on your chest. Now breathe in slowly through your nose and aim to make the hand on your stomach rise while the hand on your chest stays relatively still. This is how you breathed naturally as a small child, before years of stress and tension taught your body to breathe high and tight. The belly rising means your diaphragm, the large muscle beneath your lungs, is doing its proper work, pulling air deep into the lower lungs where the body is best able to use it. Breathe in slowly for a count of 4, feeling the belly expand, then breathe out even more slowly for a count of 6, feeling the belly fall. That longer exhale is the key detail almost everyone misses. The exhale is the part of the breath most directly connected to your body's calming system. So making your out-breath longer than your in-breath tilts your entire nervous system toward calm with mechanical reliability. You don't have to believe it will work for it to work. It works on the level of physical machinery, beneath belief. Practice this slow belly breathing for just 2 minutes, and pay attention to what shifts in your body. Your shoulders, which you may not have noticed were lifted toward your ears, begin to drop. The tightness in your jaw loosens. The racing quality of your thoughts slows to something more manageable. This is not your imagination, and it's not a placebo. You've physically intervened in a biological process and changed its direction, using nothing but the deliberate movement of air. No equipment, no app, no special location required. You carry this tool with you everywhere you go, available in any meeting, any difficult conversation, any sleepless night, any moment of sudden panic, completely invisible to everyone around you. There's a specific technique worth learning for the moments when stress hits hard and fast, when you need to regain control quickly, and it's used by people in genuinely high-pressure professions, where staying calm under extreme conditions is a matter of survival. It's sometimes called box breathing, because it has 4 equal parts like the 4 sides of a box. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 4. Hold the air gently in your lungs for a count of 4. Breathe out through your mouth for a count of 4. Then hold your lungs empty for a count of 4 before beginning again. In for 4, hold for 4. Out for 4, hold for 4. Repeat this cycle 4 times, which takes barely over a minute, and you'll feel a noticeable shift in your level of activation. The genius of this technique is that the counting itself occupies the part of your mind that would otherwise be spinning through worst-case scenarios, while the structured rhythm physically regulates your nervous system. You're calming the body and quieting the mind at the same time with a single tool in under 2 minutes. Now consider how to actually use this in the texture of a real day, because a technique you only practice in calm moments will desert you in stressful ones unless you've built it into a habit. The mistake people make is treating breathing techniques as something they'll reach for only during emergencies. But a tool you only use in emergencies is a tool you're using for the first time during the exact moment you most need it to work reliably, which is the worst possible time to be a beginner. Instead, practice your slow belly breathing during ordinary calm moments. 2 minutes when you first wake, 2 minutes before a meal, 2 minutes before sleep. By practicing when you don't need it, you build a deep, automatic familiarity so that when stress strikes and you reach for the technique, your body already knows the path by heart and falls into it easily. You're not learning to swim during the storm. You've been swimming in calm water for weeks, so the storm finds you ready. Picture a real scenario. Someone is about to walk into a room to give a presentation that matters enormously to their career. Their heart is pounding. Their hands feel cold. Their breath has gone shallow and quick. Their mind is racing through every way this could go wrong. The old response would be to fight these sensations, to tell themselves to calm down, which never works, or to push through while the panic quietly sabotages their clarity and their voice. Instead, this person steps aside for 90 seconds before walking in. They do 4 rounds of box breathing. They feel their heart rate ease from a sprint to something steadier. And here's the crucial mental move they make alongside the breathing. Instead of telling themselves, "I need to calm down," they tell themselves, "My body is giving me energy for this, and I'm going to use it." They've stopped fighting the activation and started directing it. They walk into that room not drained by their stress, but powered by it, alert and present and sharp. The stress didn't disappear. It got transformed through breath and reframe, from an obstacle into fuel. This reframe deserves real attention, because the breathing and the mindset work together, neither one fully effective without the other. When you feel stress rising and you begin to breathe slowly and deliberately, pair it with a simple internal statement that reinterprets what's happening in your body. Rather than "I'm so anxious," try "My body is preparing me to meet this." Rather than "I can't handle this pressure," try "This energy is here to help me focus." These aren't empty affirmations you're trying to force yourself to believe against the evidence. They're accurate descriptions of what's physically true, because that activation genuinely is your body preparing you. Genuinely is energy available for focus. You're not lying to yourself to feel better. You're telling yourself the more accurate of 2 available truths, and choosing the interpretation that serves you instead of the one that sinks you. Beyond handling acute stress in the moment, Regular breathing practice slowly changes your baseline over time. The same way, regular physical exercise gradually changes your resting fitness even on days you're not exercising. People who practice slow, deliberate breathing for a few minutes daily over weeks and months tend to develop a calmer resting state overall, a nervous system that sits a little further from the edge of panic, that takes longer to become overwhelmed and recovers faster once it does. You're not just putting out fires as they appear. You're slowly making your whole inner landscape less flammable, less prone to catching every spark that life throws at it. There's a quiet dignity in knowing that no matter what happens around you, no matter how chaotic the external situation becomes, you hold in your own body a reliable way to return to steadiness. Other people cannot take your breath from you. No circumstance can remove this tool from your reach. In the most difficult moments of your life, when everything else feels out of your control, you will still have this, the slow rise of the belly, the long, steady exhale, the simple 4-count rhythm that brings you back to yourself. Stress will keep arriving for the rest of your life, in forms large and small, expected and sudden. But you are no longer someone at the mercy of it. You've learned that the same energy that can overwhelm you can also power you, and that the difference between those two outcomes often comes down to something as simple, as available, and as entirely within your control as the next breath you choose to take. Chapter 5. Cultivate gratitude every day to boost lasting happiness. Imagine you woke up tomorrow with only the things you remembered to be thankful for today. The roof over your head, the people who matter to you, the ability to walk across a room, the eyes reading these words, the warm meal you barely noticed eating, the heart that has beaten faithfully for every second of your life, without ever once asking for your attention or thanks. Most of us would wake up to a far emptier life than the one we actually have, because most of us walk through our days almost completely blind to the abundance already surrounding us. This isn't a character flaw or a sign that you're ungrateful by nature. It's simply how the human mind is built. The mind is designed to notice what's missing, what's wrong, what's threatening, and to ignore what's working, what's present, what's good. This design kept our ancestors alive in a dangerous world, but in the modern world it quietly robs us of happiness that's already sitting in our hands, unrecognized. The mind has a tendency that researchers call adaptation, and understanding it is the first step toward genuine gratitude. Whatever good thing enters your life, no matter how much you wanted it, no matter how happy it made you at first, your mind eventually adjusts to it and stops noticing it. The promotion you celebrated becomes just your job. The home you dreamed of becomes just the place you live. The person you couldn't believe wanted to be with you becomes just your partner, sometimes even a source of irritation. This adaptation is relentless and automatic. It means that chasing happiness through acquiring more money, more success, more possessions is like running on a track that speeds up exactly as fast as you do, leaving you perpetually in the same spot no matter how hard you sprint. Gratitude is the one reliable way to step off that track, because gratitude works by reawakening your attention to what you already have, rather than directing it toward what you don't yet possess. Here's the core mechanism worth understanding clearly. Gratitude and dissatisfaction cannot fully occupy your mind at the same moment. When you're genuinely focused on appreciating something, your attention is filled, and there's simply no room left in that same instant for the gnawing sense that you don't have enough. This isn't about denying real problems or pretending difficult circumstances don't exist. It's about recognizing that your attention is limited and precious, that you can only point it at so many things at once, and that the things you choose to point it at largely determine how your life feels from the inside. Two people can live nearly identical lives, with similar incomes, similar challenges, similar relationships, and one feels perpetually deprived while the other feels deeply fortunate. The difference is rarely in their circumstances. It's almost entirely in where they've trained their attention to land. The most practical way to begin building gratitude is also the simplest, and its simplicity causes many people to dismiss it before they've given it a fair trial. Each day, write down 3 specific things you're grateful for. The word specific is doing enormous work in that sentence, so don't skip past it. Writing "I'm grateful for my family" every single day quickly becomes a hollow ritual, words your hand produces while your mind has already wandered elsewhere. But writing "I'm grateful that my daughter laughed at my terrible joke this morning, and it made the whole kitchen feel lighter" engages your mind completely, because you have to actually return to the moment, feel it again, locate exactly what made it good. Specificity is what separates real gratitude that changes how you feel from empty gratitude that changes nothing. Push yourself toward the small and particular rather than the large and general. The grand things you're thankful for are obvious, and your mind has already adapted to them. It's the small, specific, easily overlooked moments that carry the real power. Because noticing them trains your attention to find good in the ordinary texture of daily life, which is where most of your life actually takes place. There's a deeper version of this practice that intensifies its effect, and it involves imagining the absence of what you have. Take something good in your life, something you've completely adapted to and stopped noticing, and spend a moment genuinely imagining it gone. Picture your normal morning without the person who shares your home. Picture trying to get through your day without the use of your legs. Picture your life without the friend you can call when everything falls apart. This isn't a morbid exercise designed to frighten you, and you shouldn't dwell in it too long. It's a brief, deliberate jolt that strips away the numbness of adaptation and lets you see clearly for just a moment the staggering value of what you've been treating as ordinary and guaranteed. When you return your attention to the thing still present in your life, you see it fresh again, the way you saw it when it was new, before your mind dulled it into background. This single technique can restore appreciation for things you stopped feeling grateful for years ago. Gratitude becomes far more powerful when you direct it outward toward other people, not just inward toward your own circumstances. Most of the good in your life arrived through other human beings. The teacher who saw something in you, the stranger who showed kindness on a hard day, the friend who stayed when leaving would have been easier, the parent who sacrificed in ways you may have never fully understood. Yet how often do these people actually hear that you noticed, that you remember, that it mattered? Here is a practice with the power to change relationships permanently. Think of one person who helped shape your life in some meaningful way and who has never been properly thanked. Write them a specific message, or better still, tell them directly, naming exactly what they did and exactly how it affected you. The effect of this runs in 2 directions at once. It fills the other person with the deep human experience of being seen and appreciated, which almost everyone hungers for and rarely receives. And it floods you with the warmth of connection, anchoring your gratitude in real relationship rather than leaving it as a private feeling locked inside your own head. Gratitude shared with the person who earned it multiplies, where gratitude kept silent slowly fades. Consider how this reshapes the experience of an ordinary, unremarkable day. Someone without a gratitude practice wakes up, immediately reaches for their phone, scrolls through a stream of other people's highlights and the world's bad news, feels a low background hum of dissatisfaction, rushes through breakfast without tasting it, moves through work focused entirely on what's going wrong and what's still undone, comes home depleted, and falls asleep with a vague sense that the day was just another grind to survive. Someone with a gratitude practice can live the exact same day with a completely different inner experience. They wake and notice, before reaching for anything, that they slept in a warm bed and woke to another day of being alive. They taste their breakfast because they've trained attention to land on what's present. At work they still face the problems, but they also notice the colleague who made them laugh, the small task they completed well, the window with actual sunlight coming through it. They come home and tell someone they love one specific thing they appreciated about them. The day's events were identical in both lives. The quality of being alive inside that day was worlds apart, and the only difference was a trained habit of attention that anyone can build. It's important to be honest about something, because false promises help no one. Gratitude is not about pretending your problems don't exist or forcing a smile over genuine pain. A person facing real loss, real injustice, real hardship should not be told to simply feel grateful and move along. And this practice is not an instruction to suppress legitimate difficulty. Real gratitude lives alongside real struggle rather than denying it. You can grieve something painful and still feel thankful for the people supporting you through it. You can be frustrated with a hard situation and still appreciate the strength you're discovering in yourself as you face it. Mature gratitude isn't the naive insistence that everything is wonderful. It's the practiced ability to hold the full truth of your life, including its difficulties, while refusing to let the difficulties blind you to everything good that remains. The two coexist. In fact, gratitude is often what gives people the strength to face hardship, because it reminds them of what they're fighting for and what they still have to stand on. The lasting happiness this builds is different in kind, from the spikes of pleasure that come from getting something you wanted. Those spikes are real but brief, fading quickly as adaptation does its work, and the new thing becomes ordinary. Gratitude produces something steadier and more durable, a quiet baseline contentment that doesn't depend on your circumstances constantly improving. It's the difference between happiness that needs to be fed with a steady supply of new acquisitions and happiness that draws its nourishment from learning to fully receive what's already here. The first kind keeps you perpetually hungry no matter how much you consume. The second kind can leave you feeling genuinely full while sitting in a life that, on paper, hasn't changed at all. You already possess, right now, nearly everything you would ever think to wish for on the worst day of your life. If today you lost the ability to see, you would give anything tomorrow to have back the ordinary sight you currently use to watch television without a second thought. If today you lost someone you love, you would give anything for one more ordinary afternoon with them, the kind you currently let pass without notice. The astonishing truth is that you are living right now inside the answered prayers of some harder version of your life that hasn't happened yet, or some harder version that already passed. Gratitude is simply the practice of waking up to this before loss forces you to see it. Begin tonight. 3 specific things, written down, felt rather than just listed. Do it tomorrow and the day after, and watch as your attention slowly retrains itself to find the good that was always there, waiting patiently for you to finally notice it was there all along. Chapter 6. Silence your inner critic and build genuine self-confidence. There is a voice inside your head that speaks to you in a tone you would never accept from another human being. If a stranger followed you around all day, saying the things this voice says, you would walk away, end the relationship, refuse to be in the same room. Yet this voice has lived rent-free in your mind for years, perhaps decades, and you've not only tolerated it, you've believed it. It tells you that you're not good enough, that you'll embarrass yourself, that everyone can see your flaws, that you're going to fail like you always do, that who do you think you are to even try? We call this voice the inner critic, and nearly every person alive carries some version of it. Learning to recognize it, question it, and gradually quiet it is one of the most freeing things you will ever do for yourself. Because so much of what holds people back in life isn't a lack of ability, it's the constant, draining presence of this voice convincing them not to try. The first thing to understand about your inner critic is where it actually came from, because it did not originate with you. That harsh voice was installed, not born. It's an echo, assembled over years from the criticisms of others, a demanding parent, a cruel teacher, a humiliating moment in childhood, a culture that taught you your worth had to be earned and proven. The voice feels like your own thoughts, because it speaks in the first person and uses your own internal voice. But listen closely, and you'll often hear that the actual words, the tone, the specific accusations, belong to someone from your past. This realization is powerful because it means the inner critic is not the deep truth about who you are. It's a recording of other people's fears and judgments, playing on a loop you never consciously agreed to start, and anything that was learned can be unlearned. Anything installed can be examined and, piece by piece, removed. The critical mistake most people make is believing the inner critic is telling them the truth, treating its harsh pronouncements as accurate assessments rather than as the distorted, fearful exaggerations they almost always are. The inner critic is not a fair judge weighing evidence carefully. It's a prosecutor who only ever argues one side, who ignores all evidence in your favor, who takes a single mistake and inflates it into a permanent verdict about your entire character. When it says you always fail, it conveniently forgets every time you succeeded. When it says everyone thinks you're foolish, it has no actual access to what anyone is thinking and is simply inventing the worst possibility and presenting it as fact. Once you start treating the inner critic as an unreliable narrator rather than a truth teller, its grip on you begins to loosen because you stop automatically accepting its claims and start examining them. A powerful practical step is to give the voice a name and a separate identity, deliberately treating it as something distinct from yourself rather than as your own genuine thinking. When the harsh voice starts up, you might silently note, "There goes that critical voice again," or you might even give it a name. Something slightly ridiculous works best, because it's hard to be intimidated by a voice you've named something silly. The point isn't the specific name. The point is the act of separation. The moment you can observe the voice as a separate thing happening within you, rather than being completely fused with it, you've reclaimed the position of the one who decides whether to believe it. You become the listener evaluating the speaker, instead of the speaker who can't tell where the words are coming from. From that position of separation, you can finally start to talk back. And talking back is exactly the next skill to build, though not in the way people might expect. You don't silence the inner critic by screaming at it or trying to force it into submission, because fighting it directly often just feeds it more energy. Instead, you answer it the way a calm, fair, slightly skeptical friend would answer someone being needlessly harsh. When the critic says, "You're going to humiliate yourself in that meeting," you respond internally with something measured and honest. "I might feel nervous, and that's okay, and I've handled meetings before, and even if it doesn't go perfectly, that won't define me." Notice this response doesn't pretend everything will be flawless, because false confidence is fragile, and the critic will easily knock it down. Instead, it offers a grounded, realistic alternative to the catastrophe the critic predicted. You're not replacing harsh lies with pleasant lies. You're replacing exaggerated negativity with measured truth, and measured truth is far more stable to stand on than either extreme. This connects directly to one of the most important distinctions in this entire chapter: the difference between genuine self-confidence and the fragile, fake confidence that so many people chase. Fake confidence is the belief that you're better than others, that you won't fail, that you're exceptional and special, and above the ordinary struggles of normal people. This kind of confidence is brittle, because it shatters the instant reality delivers a failure, and reality always eventually delivers a failure. Genuine self-confidence is something entirely different and far more durable. It's not the belief that you won't fail. It's the quiet, settled knowledge that you'll be okay even when you do fail, that your worth doesn't hang on any single outcome, that you can survive embarrassment, recover from mistakes, and keep moving forward regardless. Genuine confidence isn't, "I'm certain I'll succeed." It's, "I'll be all right either way, so I might as well try." This kind of confidence cannot be shattered by failure, because it was never built on the absence of failure in the first place. It was built on your faith in your own ability to recover and continue. The way you actually build this genuine confidence is not through positive thinking or repeating affirmations into a mirror, useful as small tools as those might be. Real confidence is built through action, specifically through the accumulated evidence of doing hard things and surviving them. Every time you do something that scares you and come out the other side, you deposit a piece of evidence into a growing account that says, "I can handle difficult things." This is why confidence cannot be talked into existence and must instead be earned through experience. You don't think your way into confidence and then act. You act, often while still afraid, and the action slowly produces the confidence. This means the path forward is to deliberately take small actions outside your comfort zone, regularly, before you feel ready. Because waiting to feel ready means waiting forever. Speak up in the meeting. Make the call you've been avoiding. Try the thing you might fail at. Each small act of courage, regardless of how it turns out, builds the foundation that no inner critic can talk you out of, because it's built on real evidence rather than empty reassurance. Consider how this plays out in a real life. Someone has wanted to apply for a position far above what they think they're qualified for. The inner critic has a field day, listing every reason they'll be rejected, every way they'll embarrass themselves, every more deserving candidate. The old pattern would be to believe the critic completely and never submit the application, then spend years quietly wondering what might have happened. The new pattern looks different. This person notices the critical voice, names it as the old recording it is, answers it with measured honesty. "I might get rejected, and rejection won't kill me," and not trying guarantees the outcome the critic is afraid of anyway. Then they take the action while still feeling the fear, and they submit the application. Whatever the outcome, they've just made a deposit into their account of evidence that they can act despite the critic. And here is the deeper truth. The result of the application matters far less than the fact that they proved to themselves they could move forward without the critic's permission. That proof is the real prize, and it compounds with every repetition. There's another habit worth building, one that targets the inner critic's favorite weapon, which is comparison. The critic loves to measure you against others and always finds you lacking, comparing your behind-the-scenes struggles to other people's polished public images, an unfair comparison rigged for you to lose every time. Train yourself to catch this comparison the moment it begins and redirect it. The only fair and useful comparison is between who you are today and who you were in the past. Are you a little more patient than you were a year ago? Are you handling difficulty a little better than you used to? This comparison is fair because it's against the only person whose full story you actually know, yourself, and it's useful because it measures the one thing you can actually influence, your own growth over time. Compared to others, you will always find someone ahead of you, and the critic will always point at them. Compared to your former self, you can see real, encouraging evidence of progress, and that evidence quietly starves the critic of its favorite fuel. It's worth being honest that the inner critic rarely disappears entirely, and expecting it to vanish completely will only set you up for frustration. Even people who've done this work for years still hear the voice occasionally, especially during times of stress, exhaustion, or when attempting something new and frightening. The goal was never total silence. The goal is to change your relationship with the voice so completely that it loses its authority over your choices. You can hear it and no longer obey it. You can notice it and let it pass without it stopping you. The critic becomes like a difficult acquaintance whose opinions you've learned to take with heavy skepticism, present but no longer in charge. You've taken back the steering wheel of your own life, and now the critic rides in the back seat, still talking, but no longer driving. You have spent enough years letting a borrowed voice of fear narrate your potential, and talk you out of the life you're capable of living. The accusations it makes were never the truth about you, only the fears of others echoing through your mind long after those people are gone. Starting now, you get to question that voice instead of obeying it, to answer it with steady honesty instead of crumbling beneath it, and to build, through small acts of courage repeated over time, a genuine confidence that doesn't depend on never failing, but rests instead on knowing you can rise again every time you fall. The critic told you that you weren't enough. The accumulated evidence of your own courageous actions will tell you something truer, that you were always capable of far more than that frightened voice ever allowed you to believe. Chapter 7. Master your emotions and stay calm under constant pressure. Emotions are messengers, not masters, though most people have the relationship exactly backwards. They treat emotions as commands that must be obeyed the instant they arrive. Anger shows up, so they attack. Fear shows up, so they retreat. Sadness shows up, so they collapse into it. They live as servants to whatever feeling happens to be passing through them, tossed around by their inner weather like a small boat with no one steering. But emotions were never meant to be commands. They were meant to be information, signals carrying a message about something happening inside you or around you, and like any messenger, they deliver their message and then await your decision about what to do. The person who masters their emotions is not someone who feels less. It's someone who has learned to receive the message without immediately obeying the impulse that comes attached to it. This distinction between feeling an emotion and being controlled by it is the entire foundation of emotional mastery under pressure. The first truth to absorb is that emotions are not problems to be eliminated. There's a damaging myth, especially common among people trying to become stronger or more disciplined, that the goal is to stop feeling difficult emotions altogether, to become so controlled that anger, fear, and sadness no longer touch you. This is not strength, it's suppression, and suppression always exacts a price. Emotions that are pushed down do not disappear. They go underground and resurface later, often in worse forms as physical tension, as sudden outbursts over small things, as a low background numbness that drains the color out of life. The emotionally masterful person does not refuse to feel. They feel fully, they let the emotion move through them, and crucially, they don't let the emotion make their decisions for them. Feeling and acting are two separate events, and the space between them is where all your power lives. Understanding what an emotion actually is helps enormously in handling it. An emotion is a combination of a physical sensation in your body and a story your mind tells about that sensation. The physical part arrives first and fast, the tightness in your chest, the heat rising in your face, the sinking feeling in your stomach. Then the mind rushes in to explain it, attaching a story. This person disrespected me. This situation is a disaster. I'm in danger. Here's what almost nobody realizes. You have far more influence over the story than you do over the initial physical sensation. The sensation may arrive uninvited, but the story is something you participate in writing, and changing the story changes the entire emotional experience. The same racing heart can be labeled as terror or as anticipation. The same churning stomach can be read as dread or as the body gearing up. By learning to question the automatic story your mind attaches to a sensation, you gain enormous control over emotions that previously felt completely beyond your reach. The practical skill that makes all of this possible is naming the emotion as it arises. This sounds almost too simple to matter, but the act of naming an emotion, silently identifying it as it happens, produces a measurable shift in how the emotion affects you. When you're swept up in anger without naming it, you are the anger, fused with it completely, and it runs the show. But the moment you note internally, this is anger, I'm feeling anger right now, you create a small but vital separation between yourself and the feeling. You become the observer of the emotion rather than its prisoner. This is sometimes called labeling, and it works because the very act of putting a feeling into words engages the thinking part of your brain, which naturally turns down the intensity of the purely reactive part. You don't have to do anything else, just accurately name what you're feeling, and the naming itself begins to settle it. Practice this constantly, with every emotion, pleasant and unpleasant, until naming your feelings becomes as automatic as the feelings themselves. Once you've named an emotion, the next move is to get curious about it, rather than immediately trying to escape it or act on it. Ask yourself what this feeling is actually telling you. Anger usually signals that a boundary has been crossed or a value has been violated. Fear usually signals a perceived threat, which may or may not be real. Sadness usually signals a loss of something that mattered to you. Anxiety often signals uncertainty about something you care about. Each emotion carries genuine information, and when you pause to ask what the message is, you transform the emotion from a force pushing you around into a source of insight you can actually use. The angry person who pauses to ask what boundary was crossed can then address that boundary calmly and effectively, which is far more powerful than simply exploding. The anxious person who asks what uncertainty is driving the feeling can then take concrete steps to reduce that uncertainty. Curiosity turns emotion from an enemy into an advisor. Now consider what happens specifically under constant, sustained pressure, because that's a different challenge than handling a single emotional spike. When pressure is relentless, when the demands keep coming, and there's no clear end in sight, the danger is not one big emotional explosion, but a slow accumulation, a steady buildup of tension that eventually overwhelms your capacity to cope. The key here is regular release, rather than constant containment. Imagine trying to hold a heavy weight at arm's length all day, without ever setting it down. Eventually, your arm fails, not because the weight got heavier, but because you never gave yourself a moment to lower it. Emotional pressure works the same way. Under sustained stress, you need deliberate, regular moments to set the weight down, brief pauses to breathe, to feel what you're feeling without judgment, to discharge the accumulating tension before it reaches the breaking point. People who stay calm under prolonged pressure are rarely people with superhuman tolerance. They're people who have learned to release pressure in small amounts continuously, rather than holding everything in until it bursts. Picture someone facing a genuinely high-pressure period, several major problems converging at once, demands from every direction, no obvious relief in sight. The person without emotional mastery white-knuckles through it, suppressing everything, projecting a calm exterior, while the pressure builds invisibly inside, until one small additional frustration triggers a reaction far out of proportion to its cause, and they snap, damaging relationships and their own credibility. The person with emotional mastery handles the same period completely differently. Throughout each day, they name what they're feeling as it arises. Overwhelmed at 10 in the morning, frustrated after a difficult call, anxious about an unresolved problem. They take brief moments to breathe and release, rather than holding it all in. They get curious about what each emotion is telling them, and respond to the message instead of reacting to the impulse. The external pressure is identical, but one person is quietly cracking, while the other is steadily managing, and the difference is entirely in their relationship with their own internal experience. A crucial element of mastery under pressure is learning to delay your response to strong emotions, to build in a reliable gap between feeling and acting. The strongest, most reactive impulses almost always arrive in the first moments of an emotion, when it's at peak intensity, and this is precisely when you're least equipped to make a wise decision. Emotions, by their nature, are temporary. They rise, peak, and fade, often within minutes if you don't keep feeding them with stories. The simple discipline of waiting, of refusing to act on a strong emotion in its first heated moments, allows the peak to pass so that you can respond from a steadier place. When you feel the urge to fire off an angry message, to make a major decision in a moment of fear, to say something cutting in a flash of hurt, build in a rule that you will wait, even just for a short while, before acting. Almost every regrettable action in human history was taken in the brief window of peak emotional intensity, and almost all of them could have been avoided by simply letting the wave crest and recede before responding. There's a deeper layer to emotional mastery that's worth naming, and it's about your relationship with discomfort itself. Much of what drives people to lose control under pressure is not the pressure, but their desperation to escape the uncomfortable feelings the pressure produces. They react impulsively because the discomfort feels unbearable, and they'll do anything to make it stop, even things that harm them in the long run. But here's a quietly transformative realization: you can survive discomfort. Difficult emotions, no matter how intense, are not actually dangerous in themselves. They feel terrible, but feeling terrible will not destroy you. When you truly internalize, you can sit with an uncomfortable feeling without needing to immediately fix it, escape it, or act on it. You gain an almost unshakable steadiness. You're no longer driven by the panicked need to make the bad feeling stop, which means you can stay calm and think clearly even while feeling deeply uncomfortable. This is perhaps the highest form of emotional mastery, the ability to remain functional and wise in the very presence of distress, rather than being ruled by the urge to escape it. Building all of this requires practice during ordinary moments, not just during crises. Treat every minor emotional event in your daily life as a training opportunity. The small flash of irritation in traffic, the brief disappointment when plans change, the mild anxiety before an ordinary phone call, each one is a chance to practice naming the emotion, getting curious about its message, creating a gap before responding, and sitting with discomfort without immediately escaping it. By practicing on small emotions during calm periods, you build the skill so deeply that it's available to you automatically when the large emotions arrive during genuine pressure. You cannot learn emotional mastery during an emergency any more than you can learn a complex skill in the middle of needing it perfectly. You build it in the small daily moments, so it's ready when everything is on the line. You will feel every emotion a human being can feel for the rest of your life. The difficult ones along with the beautiful ones, and that's not a flaw to be fixed, but the very texture of being fully alive. The goal was never to stop feeling. The goal is to stop being ruled by what you feel, to receive each emotion as the messenger it is, to read its message with curiosity rather than fear, and then to decide, from a place of steadiness, how you actually want to respond. The pressures of life will not stop coming, and many of them you cannot control. But the one thing you can master, with practice and patience, is the inner response to it all. And a person who has mastered their inner response holds a kind of freedom that no external pressure can ever take away. The freedom to remain themselves, calm and clear and steady, no matter what storm is breaking around them. Chapter 8. Create a positive morning routine that fuels your entire day. The first hour after you wake sets the tone for every hour that follows. The way the first few notes of a song establish the key the entire piece will play in. How you begin your morning is not a small or trivial matter. It's a decision that quietly shapes your mood, your energy, your focus, and your sense of control over the entire day ahead. Yet most people surrender this critical hour without a second thought. They wake to a jarring alarm, immediately reach for their phone in the dark, and pour the chaos of the entire world directly into their mind before they've even fully opened their eyes. The news, the messages, the comparisons, the demands, all of it floods in during the most impressionable moments of the day, and then people wonder why they feel scattered, anxious, and behind before they've even gotten out of bed. The quality of your morning is not random. It's built, deliberately or by default, and choosing to build it on purpose is one of the highest leverage changes you can make in your entire life. Consider what actually happens in those first waking moments from the inside. When you wake, your mind is in a uniquely open and unguarded state, soft and receptive, not yet armored by the busyness and skepticism that develops as the day goes on. Whatever you feed it during this window, sinks in deeply and colors everything that comes after. This is why reaching immediately for your phone is so quietly damaging. You're taking the most receptive, impressionable hour of your day and handing it over to a stream of content specifically engineered to capture your attention through outrage, comparison, and anxiety. You're letting strangers and algorithms set the emotional tone of your day before you've had a single moment to set it yourself. The single most powerful change many people can make to their mornings is also the simplest. Do not touch your phone for the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking. Let your mind belong to you before you let it belong to the world. The foundation of a positive morning routine is winning the very first decision of the day, which is the decision to actually get up when you intended to. Hitting the snooze button repeatedly might feel like a small, harmless indulgence, but it teaches your mind a quietly corrosive lesson, that your stated intentions don't have to be honored, that you can break a promise to yourself the moment it becomes slightly uncomfortable. Starting the day by following through on your first small commitment, getting up when you said you would, sends the opposite message, that you are someone who does what they decide to do. This single act of follow-through builds a quiet momentum of self-respect that carries into every decision afterward. Place your alarm across the room if you must, so that getting up is required to silence it. And let the first victory of your day be the simple act of keeping your word to yourself. What you actually do in those first protected minutes matters less than the principle behind it, which is to fill your mind and body with things that strengthen you before the day's demands begin pulling at you. Movement is one of the most reliable choices because the body and mind are far more connected than people realize. And physically activating your body in the morning sends energy and alertness flooding through your whole system. This doesn't require an intense workout. Even a few minutes of stretching, a short walk, or some simple movement to wake the body up shifts your entire physical and mental state from the heavy fog of sleep into something alert and ready. The body that moves in the morning tells the brain that the day has begun and it's time to be present. And this physical signal is far more effective than trying to think your way into feeling awake and motivated. Alongside movement, building in a few minutes of stillness creates a powerful balance, energizing the body while settling the mind. This might be a few minutes of slow breathing, sitting quietly with a warm drink, or simply being present without reaching for any distraction. In a world that pulls people in 1,000 directions the instant they're available, beginning the day with deliberate stillness is an act of reclaiming your own mind. It establishes, before anything else demands your attention, that you are the one in charge of where your focus goes. This stillness doesn't need to be lengthy or complicated. A few minutes of genuine quiet, where you're simply present with yourself and your breath, creates a centered foundation that makes you far less reactive to whatever the day throws at you later. There's tremendous value in adding a moment of intention to your morning, a brief pause to decide what kind of day you actually want to have and who you want to be within it. Most people let their days happen to them, reacting to whatever comes, never pausing to consciously choose their direction. A simple practice of asking yourself each morning, what matters most today? What kind of person do I want to be today? What is one thing that would make today meaningful? Transforms you from a passive recipient of your day into its active author. This takes only a minute or two, but it points your entire day in a chosen direction, rather than letting it drift wherever circumstances push it. When challenges arise later, as they always do, you have an anchor, a clear sense of your intention that helps you respond with purpose, instead of just reacting to whatever lands in front of you. Picture two people beginning the same ordinary Tuesday. The first wakes to a blaring alarm, hits snooze 3 times, finally drags themselves up already feeling behind, immediately scrolls through their phone absorbing a stream of bad news and other people's apparent successes, rushes through getting ready while feeling anxious and rushed. and stumbles into their day already depleted, reactive, and scattered before anything has even happened. The second wakes and gets up on the first alarm, leaves the phone untouched, spends a few minutes moving their body and a few minutes in quiet stillness, takes a moment to set an intention for the kind of day they want, and steps into their day feeling centered, energized, and in command of themselves. Both people face the same challenges, the same difficult co-workers, the same unexpected problems, the same traffic and demands, but one meets all of it from a foundation of depletion and chaos, while the other meets it from a foundation of strength and clarity. The difference in how their days unfold is enormous, and it was determined largely in that first hour by choices entirely within their control. It's important to understand that a morning routine does not need to be long, elaborate, or perfect to be effective, and believing it must be is exactly what stops many people from ever building one. You don't need to wake at 4 in the morning, meditate for an hour, run several miles, journal extensively, and read a chapter of a book before breakfast. That kind of overwhelming ideal causes people to give up before they start, convinced they could never maintain it. The truth is that a simple routine done consistently beats an elaborate routine done occasionally every single time. Even 10 or 15 minutes of intentional morning practice, done reliably each day, will transform your life far more than an ambitious 2-hour routine you abandon after a week. Start small, start with what you can actually sustain, and let the routine grow naturally as it becomes a settled part of your life, rather than forcing an overwhelming version that collapses under its own weight. The power of a morning routine comes not from any single morning, but from the accumulation of consistency over time, the way small deposits made daily eventually build into something substantial. One good morning will not transform your life, but a good morning repeated day after day, week after week, slowly reshapes who you are, building discipline, self-respect, and a steady foundation that compounds quietly beneath everything else you do. This is why the specific contents of your routine matter less than your commitment to showing up for it consistently. The person who does a simple, imperfect routine every single day will, over months and years, become someone fundamentally different from the person who keeps waiting for the perfect routine and never quite begins. Consistency is the engine. Everything else is detail. There's a deeper principle underneath all of this worth naming directly. A morning routine is ultimately about claiming ownership of your life from its very first moments, about refusing to let your days be something that simply happens to you, and instead making them something you deliberately create. When you take control of your morning, you're making a statement to yourself that your life is yours to shape, that you are not merely a passive object pushed around by circumstances and other people's demands, but an active force with the power to set your own direction. This sense of ownership, established each morning, radiates outward into everything else. People who command their mornings tend to command their days, and people who command their days tend, over time, to command their lives. It begins with something as small as choosing how you spend the first 30 minutes after you open your eyes. Tomorrow morning, you have a choice that you make every single day, whether you realize it or not. You can surrender your first hour to the alarm and the phone and the chaos of the outside world, beginning your day depleted and reactive. Or you can claim that hour for yourself, filling it with movement, stillness, and intention, beginning your day strong and centered and in command. The first path requires nothing and costs you everything, slowly draining your days of the energy and clarity you need to build the life you want. The second path requires a small amount of discipline and rewards you with a foundation that strengthens every hour that follows. You do not need to transform your entire morning overnight. You need only to begin, tomorrow, with 1 or 2 small intentional choices, and to repeat them the day after, and the day after that, until the morning that fuels your entire day becomes simply who you are, the natural and unshakable beginning of every day you're given. Chapter 9. Surround yourself with positive people to protect your peace. You absorb the emotional state of the people you spend the most time with, slowly and continuously, often without ever noticing it happening. Spend an evening with someone bitter and complaining, and you walk away feeling drained and vaguely negative, even if your own day was fine. Spend that same evening with someone warm and encouraging, and you leave feeling lighter, more capable, more hopeful, even if nothing about your circumstances actually changed. This is not a vague feeling or a comforting idea, it's a real and measurable phenomenon. Human beings are deeply influenced by the emotional climate around them, picking up the moods, attitudes, and outlooks of those nearby, the way a sponge takes on the color of whatever liquid it sits in. The people you surround yourself with are not a neutral background to your life. They are actively shaping your inner world, your mood, your beliefs about what's possible, and the very peace you're working so hard to build. Protecting that peace requires being honest and intentional about who you allow closest to you. The first thing to understand is that this influence operates largely beneath your conscious awareness, which is exactly what makes it so powerful and so important to examine. You don't consciously decide to adopt the attitudes of those around you. It happens gradually, through repeated exposure, the way you might pick up an accent without trying after living somewhere new. If you spend most of your time with people who complain constantly, who see problems everywhere and possibilities nowhere, who treat life as something happening to them rather than something they can shape, you will slowly absorb that worldview as your own, mistaking it for simple realism. And if you spend your time with people who face difficulties with resilience, who look for solutions, who treat life as something they can influence, you will slowly absorb that outlook instead. The danger is that because this absorption is invisible, most people never realize their own attitudes are being quietly shaped by their company, and they continue spending time in environments that are slowly dragging them down without ever connecting the cause to the effect. This means that protecting your peace requires you to honestly assess the people in your life, not with judgment or coldness, but with clear-eyed awareness of how each relationship affects your inner state. Pay attention to how you feel after spending time with different people. After being with certain people, do you feel energized, encouraged, more like yourself, more hopeful about your life? After being with others, do you feel drained, smaller, more anxious, more negative, somehow diminished? Your emotional state after an interaction is honest data, telling you something real about the effect that person has on you that your loyalty or habit might otherwise hide. This isn't about labeling people as good or bad. It's about recognizing that different relationships have different effects on your well-being, and that you have both the right and the responsibility to take those effects seriously when deciding where to invest your limited time and energy. There's a particular kind of person worth learning to recognize, the one who consistently drains the energy and optimism from every room they enter. These are people locked in perpetual negativity, who find the cloud around every silver lining, who respond to every hope with a reason it won't work, who seem to need everyone around them to feel as low as they do. Time with such people leaves you feeling heavy and discouraged, your own optimism slowly eroded by their constant pessimism. This does not make them evil, and many of them are struggling with real pain that deserves compassion. But compassion for someone does not require you to let their negativity steadily poison your own peace. You can care about a person while also recognizing that being constantly immersed in their negativity is harming you, and you can adjust how much of your time and emotional energy you give them accordingly. Protecting yourself from a draining influence is not cruelty. It's the basic necessary maintenance of your own well-being. On the other side stand the people who lift you, and learning to recognize and cherish these relationships is just as important as recognizing the draining ones. These are people who genuinely want to see you grow, who celebrate your successes without envy, who encourage you when you're struggling, who challenge you to be better while still accepting you as you are. Time with these people leaves you feeling more capable and more hopeful than before. They model resilience, kindness, and a constructive way of meeting life's difficulties, and through proximity, you absorb these qualities into yourself. These relationships are among the most valuable things you can have, more valuable than money or status, because they continuously nourish the inner state from which your entire experience of life flows. When you find people like this, invest in them deeply, prioritize them, make time for them even when life is busy, because the return on that investment compounds throughout your entire life. Consider how this plays out over time in an actual life. Someone spends years primarily surrounded by people who complain constantly, who discourage ambition, who treat every dream as foolish and every effort as pointless. Slowly, without realizing it, this person's own horizons shrink. They stop trying new things because the voices around them always predict failure. They grow more cynical, more anxious, less hopeful, becoming a reflection of their environment. Now imagine the same person gradually shifts their company, spending more time with people who are encouraging, resilient, and constructive. Over months and years, something quietly transforms. They begin to believe more is possible. They take chances they wouldn't have taken before. Their baseline mood lifts. Their resilience grows. They become, through the steady influence of better company, a more hopeful and capable version of themselves. The person didn't change through willpower alone. They changed in large part by changing the emotional climate they lived in day after day. Now, an honest complication must be addressed, because not everyone who drains us can simply be removed from our lives. Sometimes the difficult or negative people are family members, longtime friends, co-workers, or others we cannot or should not simply cut out entirely. The goal here is not to ruthlessly discard every person who isn't perfectly positive, which would be both impractical and unkind. The goal is to become intentional and protected in how you engage. With people you cannot remove but who drain you, you can adjust the dose, spending less time, setting clearer boundaries, limiting how deeply you let their negativity penetrate. You can decide in advance not to absorb their pessimism, to remain warm but emotionally protected, to give them care without giving them the power to determine your mood. You can also learn to redirect conversations away from constant negativity, or to gently limit how long you stay in draining situations. Protecting your peace within an unavoidable relationship is a skill, and it allows you to honor your obligations to people while still safeguarding your own well-being. Setting boundaries is the practical tool that makes all of this possible, and it's worth understanding that boundaries are not walls built to keep people out, but guidelines that protect your peace while still allowing connection. A boundary might be deciding how much time you'll spend in a draining situation, or what topics you're willing to engage with, or how much of your emotional energy you'll give to someone's constant complaints. Boundaries are not selfish or cold. They're a recognition that your energy and peace are finite resources that you must protect in order to have anything good to offer anyone at all. A person with no boundaries, who lets everyone's negativity flow into them unchecked, eventually has nothing left to give, depleted and overwhelmed. A person with healthy boundaries protects their inner reserves, which actually allows them to be more present, more generous, and more genuinely helpful to the people who matter, because they're operating from fullness rather than depletion. There's an empowering truth hidden in all of this that's worth stating plainly. You have far more choice over your social environment than you might assume. While you cannot choose your family or every coworker, you have enormous influence over who you spend your discretionary time with, who you invest in deeply, who you allow into your closest circle, and who you gently keep at a healthier distance. Many people drift passively through their relationships, simply maintaining whatever company they happened to fall into years ago. never pausing to ask whether those relationships still serve their growth and peace. Recognizing that you can actively curate your social environment, choosing to invest more in relationships that lift you and less in those that drain you, is a profound shift from being a passive recipient of whatever company surrounds you to being the deliberate architect of your own environment. This is not manipulation or using people. It's simply taking responsibility for the powerful influence that your company has on the person you're becoming. It's also worth remembering that you are part of someone else's environment too, that the influence runs in both directions, and that the kind of presence you bring to others matters enormously. As you work to surround yourself with positive people, consider also the kind of energy you bring into the rooms you enter. Are you someone who lifts the people around you or someone who drains them? Are you the encouraging presence in your friends' lives or the discouraging one? Becoming the kind of positive, resilient, encouraging person you want to be surrounded by serves a double purpose. It makes you a better presence in the lives of others, and it naturally attracts other positive people toward you, because we are drawn to those who reflect the qualities we value. The peace and positivity you cultivate within yourself becomes something you offer outward, strengthening not just your own life, but the lives of everyone fortunate enough to spend time in your company. The peace you've worked through this entire book to build deserves to be protected, and one of the most significant ways you protect it is by being thoughtful about who you let closest to your inner world. You cannot build a calm, positive, resilient inner life while constantly immersing yourself in environments that drain and discourage you, any more than you could stay dry while standing in the rain. Choose your closest company with intention. Invest deeply in the people who lift you, encourage you, and reflect the qualities you're trying to grow. Set loving but firm boundaries with those who drain you. And become, yourself, the kind of positive presence you hope to find in others. The people around you are quietly shaping the person you are becoming every single day, whether you've chosen them deliberately or not. Choose deliberately, and let the company you keep become one of the strongest forces protecting and strengthening the peace you've fought so hard to build. Chapter 10. Commit to lifelong growth and become your best self. A tree never reaches a point where it decides it has grown enough and stops. As long as it lives, it keeps reaching, adding new rings each year, extending its branches a little further toward the light, deepening its roots a little further into the earth. Growth is not a phase the tree passes through on its way to some finished state. Growth is simply what it means for the tree to be alive. You are no different. The moment a person decides they are finished growing, that they've learned all they need to learn and become all they need to become, something quietly begins to wither in them. The most fulfilled, alive, and resilient people are not those who reached some final destination of self-improvement and settled there. They are those who fell in love with the process of growing itself, who committed to becoming a little better, a little wiser, a little more themselves for as long as they live. This final principle ties together everything that came before it, because all the calm, peace, resilience, and confidence you've been building only truly flourish when held within a lifelong commitment to continued growth. The first shift required is to stop thinking of self-improvement as a problem to be solved, and start seeing it as a way of living to be embraced. Many people approach personal growth as though it were a temporary project, something to fix themselves with, so they can finally arrive at a permanent state of being okay, after which they can stop working on themselves and just coast. But this mindset misunderstands the nature of being human. There is no final version of you waiting at the end of the road, no point at which you become complete and the work ends. There is only the ongoing process of becoming, the continuous unfolding of who you are over the course of your entire life. When you release the idea of a finish line and embrace growth as a permanent way of living, something paradoxical happens. The pressure to hurry up and arrive somewhere disappears, and you're free to enjoy the journey of becoming, which is the only thing that was ever actually available to you anyway. Central to lifelong growth is cultivating what might be called a learning orientation toward your entire life, treating everything that happens, especially the difficult things, as an opportunity to learn and grow rather than merely as something to endure or escape. Every challenge carries a lesson. Every failure contains information. Every difficult person teaches you something about patience or boundaries. Every painful experience, once you've moved through the worst of it, offers wisdom you couldn't have gained any other way. When you approach life as a continuous classroom, nothing is ever wasted, because even your hardest experiences become material for your growth. This orientation transforms your relationship with difficulty itself. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this here to teach me?" And that single shift turns life's inevitable hardships from pure suffering into fuel for becoming wiser, stronger, and more whole. A crucial truth about lifelong growth is that it happens through small, consistent steps rather than dramatic transformations, and understanding this protects you from both impatience and discouragement. People often imagine growth as sudden, dramatic change, a single moment of transformation, after which everything is different. But real, lasting growth almost never works this way. It happens gradually, through small improvements accumulated over long stretches of time, each one barely noticeable on its own, but enormous in their combined effect. Becoming slightly more patient this month, slightly more disciplined the next, slightly wiser in how you handle conflict the month after. These small changes seem insignificant in isolation, but compounded over years, they reshape you completely. This is deeply encouraging, because it means you don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight or achieve some dramatic breakthrough. You need only to keep taking small steps forward, consistently, trusting that they accumulate into profound change over time, the way single drops of water eventually carve through solid stone. Consider how a life oriented toward lifelong growth actually unfolds compared to one that isn't. One person reaches a certain point in life and quietly decides they're done growing. They stop learning new things, stop challenging themselves, stop reflecting on how they might improve. They settle into fixed patterns and defend them, treating any suggestion that they might change as a threat. Over the years, they become rigid, stagnant, increasingly disconnected from a changing world, and often quietly dissatisfied without understanding why. Another person commits to growing for life. They stay curious, keep learning, keep reflecting honestly on their own shortcomings, keep stretching themselves toward becoming better. Over those same years, they become wiser, more adaptable, more interesting, more alive. They handle the challenges of aging and changing circumstances with grace, because they never stop developing the capacity to meet new things. The difference between these two lives is staggering, and it comes down to a single ongoing choice, whether to keep growing or to decide one is finished. An essential practice within lifelong growth is regular, honest self-reflection, the willingness to look clearly at yourself and ask how you might become better. This requires a particular kind of courage, because honest self-examination means confronting your own flaws, mistakes, and areas where you fall short, which is never entirely comfortable. But this honesty is the engine of all genuine growth, because you cannot improve what you refuse to look at. Build into your life regular moments to reflect, asking yourself where you're falling short of who you want to be, what patterns are holding you back, what you could do better. This reflection must be honest but not harsh, clear-eyed about your shortcomings while remaining kind and encouraging toward yourself, because brutal self-criticism paralyzes growth, while compassionate honesty fuels it. The person who can look at themselves truthfully, acknowledge where they need to grow, and approach that growth with patience and self-compassion holds the master key to lifelong development. It's important to understand that growth is not always comfortable, and accepting this discomfort as a natural part of the process is what allows you to keep going when easier paths tempt you to stop. Real growth requires stretching beyond what's familiar, attempting things you might fail at, confronting truths about yourself you'd rather avoid, and persisting through the awkward difficulty of being a beginner at something new. This discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that you're genuinely growing, expanding beyond your current limits into new capacity. The person committed to lifelong growth learns to welcome this discomfort rather than flee from it, recognizing it as the very sensation of becoming more than they currently are. When you reframe the discomfort of growth as evidence of progress, rather than a problem to avoid, you gain the ability to keep moving forward into the very challenges that cause most people to retreat back into the comfortable and familiar. There's a deep and quiet joy available in committing to lifelong growth that's worth naming, because it transforms the entire endeavor from a grim obligation into something genuinely fulfilling. When you embrace growth as a way of life, every day becomes meaningful, because every day offers another chance to learn, to improve, to become a little more fully yourself. Life stops being a flat repetition of the same days and becomes an ongoing adventure of development. There's profound satisfaction in looking back over months and years and seeing how far you've come, in recognizing that you've handled something this year you couldn't have handled last year, in feeling yourself steadily becoming the person you've always had the potential to be. This satisfaction is not the fleeting pleasure of arriving somewhere, but the deep and renewable fulfillment of continuous becoming, a source of meaning that never runs dry, because there is always further to grow. As you commit to becoming your best self, it helps to hold a clear vision of who that best self actually is, not as a rigid destination, but as a guiding direction. Take time to consider what qualities you most want to embody, what kind of person you want to be in your relationships, how you want to handle difficulty, what you want your life to stand for. This vision serves as a compass, orienting your daily choices and small steps towards something meaningful. You will never perfectly arrive at this ideal, and that's not the point. The point is to have a direction worth moving toward, a sense of the person you're becoming that gives shape and purpose to your ongoing growth. Each day, you can ask whether your choices are moving you toward this best self or away from it, and over a lifetime of small choices pointed in the right direction, you become, gradually and unmistakably, more and more the person you most wanted to be. Everything in this book, all the calm and peace and resilience and confidence you've been building, chapter by chapter, finds its fullest expression within this commitment to lifelong growth. The ability to stay calm, to release negativity, to build resilience, to transform stress, to cultivate gratitude, to silence your inner critic, to master your emotions, to begin each day well, to surround yourself with the right people. None of these are skills you master once and then possess forever, finished and complete. They are all practices you continue to develop and deepen across your entire life, growing steadily more skilled at the art of living well the longer you commit to it. This is not a burden but a gift, because it means your capacity for peace and joy and strength can keep expanding for as long as you live, with no ceiling, no final limit, no point at which you've grown as much as you possibly can. You stand now at the end of this book, but the beginning of something far larger, the ongoing journey of becoming the fullest version of yourself, a journey that will continue for the rest of your life if you let it. The person you are today is not the person you must remain. With each passing day, through small, consistent steps, through honest reflection, through the willing embrace of growth's discomfort, you can keep becoming wiser, calmer, stronger, and more genuinely yourself. There is no finish line to cross, and that is the most freeing truth of all, because it means you are never too late, never too far behind, never beyond the possibility of growth. As long as you draw breath, you have the capacity to keep becoming more. Commit to that growth, embrace it as your way of living, and watch as the years unfold you, like the tree that never stops reaching toward the light, into the best and fullest version of the person you were always capable of being.